Hi, everybody. Welcome back to another episode of Uninterrupted. I'm your host, Chris Hammons, and with me today is our COO, John Fausz. John, say good morning.
Hey.
All right, as always, we're going to get straight to it. So what we're going to talk about today is kind of that balancing act between too much security where it's affecting your end user experience, right? There's a particular balance that everyone's got to have, and John's going to talk a little bit about that today. So, John, where do you personally think that balance should be between cybersecurity and employee productivity?
Well, it depends really on the risk of your company and what your kind of risk tolerance and risk acceptance is. But it also depends employee to employee. It depends on your compliance. There's a lot of things and factors that go into it. But what we found is that if I make security too restrictive, then the end users kind of revolt and look for ways around the security. So then it starts to be a little bit ineffective. I also have found issues with having buy-in from the employees about why they maybe should or shouldn't have security, that it changes by the role, it changes by the function, it changes by the data risk. And so there's a lot of factors that go in that we talk about and we talk with business owners and leaderships about. But really at the end of the day, this isn't just a cybersecurity question where we're starting to hear this more and more and more. Right. This isn't just a cybersecurity question. It's not just an IT discussion. This is really a discussion that comes from business leadership, looks at the risks of the organization, looks at their tolerance of the risks, looks at the employees, how they factor into that whole thing, and then the business has to make a decision with the guidance of other factors about how does the cybersecurity landscape effectively look for their organization.
Gotcha. Now, are we at a point to where the user experience is as important as the security itself almost?
Well, they have to go hand in hand, because at the end of the day, if my cybersecurity is too restrictive so that your employees can't do their jobs and function, then the cybersecurity actually fights the goal of what the business is trying to do. And so if the business needs their employees to function to make money, which they do, right. Every business needs that sort of thing. So how do we make it so that the cybersecurity works to keep the bad guys from doing what they want to do, from keeping the hackers from doing the three bad things that we talk about all the time, from getting in the middle of a financial transaction or stealing the money directly, to stealing the sensitive data and blackmailing you for its release, or locking down your operations so you consider paying a ransom. It's about money for them. So how do I make it so that your business makes money, your employees are able to do their jobs and function every day, but then we throw a wrench in the plan of the hackers so they're not able to do what they're wanting to do.
Gotcha. And so let's talk about the psychology behind this. Why do you think an employee would try to find a workaround if they have to bypass a lot of different things? What's the main reason you think they would do that?
Number one is buy-in. So we see a lot of times where companies will decide not to do the cybersecurity because the users don't understand what it's there for or how it's working to help protect them and the business as a whole. They're not understanding that they may end up being actually responsible for a cyber attack that happens in the organization. They could end up being held responsible for that if they have lax cybersecurity practices. And so it really takes a lot of user education to do this sort of thing. But what we see a lot when I'm auditing places, and what kind of sparked this discussion, is I've been auditing places who are having technology problems. Their IT people don't really fully understand cybersecurity. They're not really cybersecurity experts. And so when they're running into IT issues where they're having problems that they can't fix and problems that they can't solve, then we're starting to see the blanket response been, well, let's turn off cybersecurity software. Let's turn off cybersecurity software. Let's turn off the security, turn off the security, turn off the security, until eventually they're left with no security, but their IT problems still aren't fixed. And so there has to be processes and procedures from your cybersecurity company, from your IT company, to say, hey, if I'm going to turn off this restriction temporarily to find out why the end user's having problems, how do I go back and make sure that if that wasn't the issue, that gets turned back on? Or let's say it was the issue with a cybersecurity software. Okay, well, what are the guardrails that we're going to put around that? What are the compensating controls that we're going to put around that item and say, hey, we have to allow a little bit more risk here in this thing in order for the end user to do their job, but we're aware of it. Business leadership's aware of it. Everybody then has made a decision that said, we need to do this for our business practice, knowing that it's less secure, knowing that there's risk carried into it, but then we can do that because the business needs this item to happen in order to continue to make money.
So what type of, can you give me an example of something that you've seen a employee try to have a workaround for? Like, so what's something that they'd usually fight back against?
Right, so it'll be, hey, I need to install my own applications. Okay, and it's not that I don't trust you to install applications. I think you probably are pretty good at verifying what software comes through and whatever. What my concern is that what happens if you've clicked on something, and we all get fooled. The hackers have gotten so much better. The AI has gotten better that they're now crafting emails. People are getting their emails taken over. You're clicking on links now that you can't ever know the legitimacy of them whenever you click on them at any given moment. It would be way too costly in both time and money to vet out every single thing with a phone call to the actual person that said it before you click on it. So you're going to get fooled. Your employees are going to get fooled. And they're going to click on something bad. What happens then, if the employee can install their own software and they have approval to install their own software, that means the hackers can do so as well. Right. And so I can never guarantee that it's the employee that's sitting down at that desk and not the hacker, right? So if the employee is sitting down there, then, okay, fine, maybe install your own software. I don't really care, but I want to put a roadblock in front of that would say, okay, you have to go put in something that only you would know, or you have to go through some kind of approval process, even if it's self-approval that's worked out from the organization, but there has to be some kind of roadblock in the way that if it's not you sitting there, then how do I make it that a hacker can't install software? Another big example that I see this from all the time is emails like the holy grail of IT, right, of cybersecurity. If we could really get email security to work, then a lot of cybersecurity becomes a lot easier because a lot of the attacks come through email these days. Right. What that looks like, though, is spam filters are too restrictive, right? So spam filters, in order to try to block all the bad stuff that happens, they end up blocking legitimate things as well. So I see a lot of instances where if your spam filter is too restrictive, then the employees get mad because they're not able to do the jobs that they need to because it's blocking legitimate things that look questionable. Business can suffer. Deals can get lost because they're not quick enough on the draw to be able to respond to the things they actually need to respond to. So then you move security a layer back from the email and say, okay, we're going to allow maybe a little bit more risk in the email to allow some potentially more bad things through in order to have protections other places to have that. If we can prevent it, cool. But we're now saying, okay, we're not going to prevent it coming through because we're going to maybe block some legitimate stuff. So we're going to allow that piece to come through. So then how do I detect that nefarious software has happened? How do I detect that this unauthorized activities happen and then respond and recover from that situation? And so it's a balancing act.
Gotcha. Yeah, like, and for example of that, I would say, when MFA came out, there was a lot of pushback initially, but people are warming up to it and they're getting used to it now. Why do you think that, before they used to give a lot of pushback for MFA because it was causing an extra step, why do you think more people are just kind of letting that be at this point? Because
So business leaders understand that they have access to sensitive data. A lot of the business leadership is understanding that if we do MFA for privileged accounts, well, a lot of the business leaders are those privileged accounts. Right. And so a lot of organizations will do MFA first for those people, for your finance people, your CFO, your controller, your HR person, all those kinds of people will get the multi-factor authentication. So if they leave their laptop somewhere, then a bad guy can't get into it, or just somebody sitting down curious, or even another employee can't sit down, and if they happen to know the password, get in and look at things they shouldn't look at. So once I give those people MFA, they start to realize that this isn't actually that bad.
Right.
It is a minor inconvenience. The cybersecurity is greatly improved from doing it. It's a minor inconvenience. It's not really that bad. And they say, okay, well, we can give this out to the rest of the employees. And so it's yet again another education. Once they see, hey, this is the benefit that happens from it. This is what it actually does for my day-to-day life and my day-to-day usability of the system, and it's not that bad, then they can decide, okay, well, is this an operational risk that we want to take to the organization, knowing that it increases or decreases the cybersecurity vulnerability and the cybersecurity risk greatly on the other side.
Gotcha, okay. So you had mentioned earlier, it depends on what you're trying to protect. So I would imagine industries like healthcare or financial services, they probably have some tighter restrictions for their end users, correct?
Yeah, so compliance will drive a pretty good amount of stuff that has to do with this. There are certain things that if you have access to certain types of data, they want the people that have access to that data to have a higher cybersecurity standard. So here's a kind of analogy that I use from this is here's the fight between traditional IT and cybersecurity. IT is get it so the end user's working no matter what. And so I like to think of this as I need a document sent across town, physically carried there. So IT's job is to strap it to a rocket and have it get there as fast as possible, right, no matter what the consequences are. Get it there. If the rocket explodes in transit, send another one and get that document there as fast as possible. Whereas cybersecurity might look at that same thing and say, well, I'm going to wrap it up in foam and bubble wrap and all the things possible to protect it fully. I'm going to put it in an armored truck and I'm going to send it across town in the absolute safest manner possible that there would be really very low risk of anything ever happening to that sort of thing. Well, sometimes that makes sense for one scenario, and sometimes it makes sense for another scenario. So if we treated everything like that armored truck, business would slow to a crawl, right? If we treated everything like that risky rocket, then, you know, it could be intercepted. All kinds of things could happen with it, you know, and it's not safe at all. So there's certain things when you look at your company that you need to say, hey, maybe the marketing people can have that, or the salespeople can have that risky kind of thing where they send stuff through very, very quickly and do all that. But your HR data, your employee records, your sensitive data that you have, if you're a CPA firm, all these PII data for all these families and businesses and everything that you protect. If you're a manufacturing firm, the intellectual property that you hold or the contract data that you hold, maybe you do want to wrap that up in a tighter bucket, make it harder for the hackers to get access to, which maybe would cause some hardship for your end users as well. We can work through those scenarios, but say, hey, we need to make sure that the eyes that are actually looking at it are the eyes that are supposed to look at it, and then go from there. And that's why it's a conversation. That's why it's a thing with the business leadership to say, hey, we need to put hierarchies on these types of things and decide from there, and then make sure that the employees are trained as to why they're doing this, why those things are in place, and what the goals of the organization and the responsibility that they have to protect that. And then once we do that, then we get better buy-in.
Gotcha. Okay. Now, and that's a really good point. Let me ask you this. Do you think small to medium businesses struggle with this balancing act more so than like your enterprise level companies?
Oh, 1,000%. As we've expanded from smaller organizations to larger ones. So as you go through these transitionary periods in your organization, when you start as a small company, and a lot of the entrepreneurs that start these businesses do start as smaller companies that organically build up, kind of everybody has access to pretty much everything, right?
Right.
So as you bring on an employee, they're helping you out with all those kinds of things. And so they have access to tons of data, maybe more than they effectively need to do their jobs, but you never know from what day to day what things you're going to have them do. As we move farther into higher level organizations, though, there starts to be specialities. Like Chris here, for example, doing the sales side of things, he doesn't need access to our customer data or passwords that are specifically meant for us to handle and support the places that we do. So we have hierarchies of the types of data that people have access to. And listen, every organization understands this. Not everybody has access to the payroll. Even if you're a 5-employee company who everybody really has access to all the data that's needed for operations to handle, not everybody has access to the HR folder. Not everybody has access to the payroll. Not everybody has access to Social Security numbers and all those kinds of things for your employees because the risk is too high. You kind of intimately understand what the risk of one of your employees getting access to that or even changing their own payroll or doing any kind of nefarious behavior. So business leaders understand this already. It's just looking at that with a wider net of your company and saying, hey, does this person need access to everything? Do they need to have access to all these things in order to do their jobs? And maybe we say, hey, we're not, as you get larger with an organization, you then go through and say, this person doesn't need access to this to do their job. And if they do come across needing access to it, then we'll give them permission to it at that time.
Gotcha. Okay. So you're making a lot of sense here. So to me, it sounds like this balancing act is not solely falling on the IT team. This is more of everybody needs to be involved with making this happen, right?
Yeah. Here's the big thing that we see business leaders really struggle with today is that I, as an IT person, I, as an IT company, I, as a cybersecurity company, you name it, I don't know what your data is and who should have access to it. We can make judgment calls based on the types of folders and things like that, but it really is reliant upon you to say, hey, this person should have access, this person shouldn't have access, this role should have access, this role shouldn't have access, and make that decision and have that conversation going forward. IT and cybersecurity for years was such a hands-off thing to the business leadership. They didn't understand that it was a risk discussion for how their whole business risk happens, and we just took care of it. We had that failing too, is you call us, we're the easy button for your IT, and we kind of just take care of it and do it. And so there was a lot of things where they told us what they wanted to have happen, and we would make it happen. Now we're moving more towards a shared responsibility matrix where it says, hey, we'll do this, but we need some guidance on this sort of thing because we just don't know. We would have no way of knowing. We're not intimately involved in your data the way you are. All I can say is if I'm a hacker that goes to access this, these are the types of things I want to do to cause one of the three bad things happen.
Gotcha. Okay. Now I got kind of a tricky question here. Is there such a thing as too much security then at some point, depending on the type of business that you have?
Oh yeah. So we focus on Forbes really heavily on security that doesn't get in the employee's way, right? So you can do all kinds of security that gets in the employee's way as well as the hacker's way, or you can do cybersecurity that stays in the background. It would try to frustrate a hacker, but be limited in the amount of actual disruption it causes to your employees in order to do their jobs. It depends on the type of company you have and the type of data that you have and what those three pillars of those business risks of the bad things happening, the height of each of those three pillars depends on how much end user disruption you have from the cybersecurity. We really focus though on putting a safety net around these employees that would make it harder for a hacker to do what they need to do, but not get in the way of the end user. And then we say, okay, hey, we're going to have this safety net kind of around every organization that we do. Realistically, we have a floor for cybersecurity that we do here at Forbes that our customers have that some people may think is overkill for companies the size of or the scope of what we're protecting, but we found it makes it frustrating for hackers in order to do what they're trying to do. And the cybersecurity that we're doing doesn't get in the way of your day-to-day operations. It doesn't get in the way of the end users. And then we look and say, okay, is there more that needs to be done? Does your compliance say there's more that needs to be done? Does the type of data that you have access to say that there's more needs to be done even if you don't have compliance issues? Is your cyber insurance requesting this sort of thing? Are you getting supply chain compliance requests from your customers that say, what are you doing for these types of things? And then we look at those and decide to put those across. But yes, I would say there's a floor for cybersecurity that every business should be following. We've tailored that very much with what hackers are showing us about how they're actually going after things, how they're actually affecting companies. But then we say, okay, past that floor, let's have a discussion about how much end user disruption are we looking at how much potential end user harmship management that needs to be put over that. And that's a business leadership discussion. Then we can say, hey, what's the right cybersecurity for you? That's why I always talk about is that cybersecurity cocktail for your company, that specific recipe is different based on every company's risk tolerance, risk acceptance, and knowledge of the subject.
Gotcha. Now I'm sure you've seen a lot. So let me ask: Have you ever seen it where this actually was a real life scenario where an employee did bypass a security measure and ended up putting their company at risk?
Oh yeah, I mean I see it all the time when I go and look at companies that we audit. I find out all kinds of places where, hey, you have a user who bypasses the security. You have a user who, even though they were told not to plug in flash drives, they plug in flash drives that they find. You say, hey, I can't open this file on my company network, and they open it up somewhere else. Yes, you might say that's not as big of a risk, but then they open it up at other places. They're looking to get access to passwords that they shouldn't have. One of the big things that I see is just misconfigurations. People who did have access to things because they needed access to this thing in order to do this one aspect of their job, and nobody went back through and looked at it later to say, should you still have access? I mean, I walked into a company one day where they had an employee who used to be an admin of the payroll system, who I went on his computer and found out that he still had access to the payroll system, even though he wasn't supposed to, because somebody just went through and removed it. He didn't have that job role anymore. And I could have gone through and changed somebody's payroll record, changed the direct deposit information to pay me as a hacker. I could have given him a raise and then potentially stolen an entire pay cycle from the company with a raise to kind of wipe out their bank account and send it out to some nefarious party before they would have even known that that would have happened. And so going back through and doing what we always call the unsexy things of cybersecurity is very important to say. It's not just all tools and fun like little things and anti-hacker stuff. It's actually going through and saying, does this person still need to have the access that they've had? You know, if there's guardrails around what they're trying to do, should there still be the guardrails around there, or should we have more guardrails around them? It's a balancing act, and it's a combined partnership with your IT, cybersecurity, and business leadership.
Yeah, well, I mean, we've seen a lot of companies that we've talked to struggle to try to find that balance. So essentially, where do you think the disconnect is between the end user and their IT team?
I think it starts from the top down. I think it's such a nebulous and difficult concept that the business leaders don't know how to start. They don't know how to wrap their head around it. They think, hey, I got a guy and he's got it taken care of. And they don't realize that that guy's not done any training. He's not going out to all the conferences that we're going to. He's not looking at all the things and saying, hey, what are the hackers actually doing? He doesn't know the tradecraft. He doesn't know what the hackers are doing. And so when he makes decisions about cybersecurity for the company, he's really making a global decision for the entire company that maybe doesn't have the right thing in place. From there, once it starts at the business leadership and the business leadership gets behind cybersecurity, they start to learn more. That's why we're huge on education. Our clients that we work with, our new customers that we work with, we do a lot to educate them because they can't really make this decision unless they know a certain amount. Now, I don't need them to be cybersecurity experts,
right,
but I just need them not to be an easy target, right? So they need to know enough in order to have that be safe. Just like you're not walking around a bad part of town at night in shadows with headphones on and wearing all black, so you might get hit by a car or you might not be aware of your surroundings. We need you to be aware of your surroundings. And so once we do that and we're able to guide people through these sorts of things, then the business leaders can make better decisions, they can make more accurate decisions, and they can really do a correct risk analysis for their company. And listen, this is something that you do all the time as business leaders. We make risk decisions all the time, constantly. We make risk decisions about, are we going to expand into a new market? Okay, what would the cost be that? What would the benefit be for that? We make risk decisions about, do I need to fix this handrail at my company? Because if I don't, then I could end up with a workers' comp claim. We make these sorts of decisions constantly. You need to start making them about your IT. You need to be a more active participant in your IT and cybersecurity than just, I got a guy who takes care of it because I don't understand any of it and they just do it. No, we need some back and forth. We do need your help, and we need you to be more of an active participant of at least having a base understanding of what's going on here and how it fits in your organization and how it can help make your organization better.
Gotcha. Yeah, no, well put. So let me ask you this. If you were, just to wrap this up, if you were to give any advice to the business leaders out here who are trying to master this, trying to find this perfect balancing act so their employees aren't getting frustrated and wanting to leave and they're able to do their job, but you're also staying secure, what's that final piece of advice that you would try to give to our listeners?
So this is going to sound really biased, but I really do believe in what we do. Work with a professional on this. Please stop trying to do it by yourself, or stop doing it with kind of what you're kind of doing with somebody who's not actually an expert in this. It's a thing that you could figure out, but we've spent years figuring out, and it's one of those areas where expertise really matters, and you can really go through some potential downtime issues, productivity issues, cybersecurity issues, you name it, by not just working with an expert on this. Don't try to roll your own. We've seen cases where people have tried to roll their own cybersecurity and they've ended up getting hacked and fully encrypted. Like, really work with a professional on this. And if you talk to us, if you reach out to us, fill out the contact form on our website, what we're going to do is we're going to have a conversation. It's going to be a 15 to 20 minute conversation. No risk, no obligation, and we're just going to kind of talk about what your cybersecurity is, what your needs are, whatever you really want to talk about of how to make your company better, and then we're going to decide there of whether it's a good fit for either of us, mutually agreeable on whether we move forward and have a further discussion there. We don't talk about prices or do anything like that until way on in the conversation because, like I said, I can't know what your cybersecurity cocktail is. And so we have to figure that out before we would ever even talk about pricing. So it's beneficial to you. You'll learn more about your company, all those sorts of things. So reach out and just get an opinion.
Oh, that's great, John. And you can find our contact us form on our website, www.forbes.com. You can also find our blogs on there. And yeah, so get in touch with us. If you have any questions, don't do this alone. We can give you some guidance. We can give you some advice. Reach out to us.
Awesome. Thanks, everyone. Thank you for tuning into this episode of Uninterrupted, a podcast from Forbes Cybersecurity. We hope you walked away with practical insights to protect your business and stay ahead of the latest cyber threats. If you enjoyed today's episode, don't forget to subscribe, leave a review, and share with your colleagues. For more tips, resources, and cybersecurity updates, visit Forbes.com, that's 4bis.com, and follow us on LinkedIn and Facebook. We'll be back soon with another episode, so stay vigilant and stay uninterrupted.